Hello YouTube and welcome to the Resident Evil 2 review for the 2019 version of the game. Now, of course, starting off, I have some screenshots here. Weird flex, I know, but I like to present some kind of proof of what I've played. Of course, I haven't touched the hardcore mode yet, and I also have not touched the Tofo mode yet, as my masochism levels have not reached that area of wanting to just get beat into a bloody pulp. Now, starting off, of course, if you're a fan of Resident Evil, get this game. This game is fantastic. I have absolutely loved it. I stayed up the entire day I got it and plowed through the story. Something that I haven't done in quite a long time. Now, of course, if you jumped into the later Resident Evils, i.e. if you jumped in like Resident Evil 4 onward and never played any of the old ones, this might be a bit more difficult for you. This is definitely geared more towards fans of the original Resident Evils and with the styles and everything else. There's 3 difficulty settings. There's assisted, standard, and hardcore. And pretty much the differences between those are the amount of ammo you'll find, how much health the enemies have, and how much damage you take. Which I haven't touched assisted either, but pretty much standard how it works is the moment you get grabbed by a zombie, that's going to put you in caution. You get grabbed again, you're in danger, and you get grabbed again, you're dead. And that's how that one works. And hardcore is even more than that. I believe when you get grabbed, you get put into danger right away. Now, Resident Evil 2 is survival horror reincarnated. It's a throwback to how it was done back in the day, and it's done really well. You have to manage your inventory. You're not meant to kill everything. If you try to kill everything you see, probably outside of assisted mode, you're going to be struggling along. You can really fuck yourself over and actually brick your current run if you use up all your ammo before boss fights or so. Which you can find ammo and items during boss fights that might edge you out, but you're going to struggle if you do so, and you might get yourself stuck. You might end up using a whole bunch of healing items that you don't need if you don't make more than one save. Now, it's just going to be some random gameplay. If I have specific examples of things, I'll try to show them. That'll, of course, require me to go back through and play if I want to look for them. That's a lot of time to be consumed. Not that to say I haven't been, again, enjoying the game. I'm someone that has played the old Resident Evil 2, and I've played this one, so of course I'm going to start comparing and contrasting some of the differences between the two. Let's start first off with the map layout of the game. The police station, for instance, is much more sensible this time around. The puzzles have been redone to make more sense. You're not moving around statues to unlock doors and drop gems and such for whatever reason you would wonder why that's in a modern police station. They've been redone, and some inspirations have been taken from other games, such as the little passageway to get to the parking lot from Resident Evil Outbreak has been put into this. The sewer area has gotten massive overhaul from what I can remember, and is almost entirely different, but also still unique. The lab area is smaller than I think it was in the original. That's slightly disappointing. It's got this grand scale to it, but it's a smaller scale. I'm not sure how I feel about it. We'll get to some character changes now. Let's start off with one of the major differences, and that's the smaller characters are given more time or a different take on them. And some are good or some bad. For instance, Marvin is given more lines and more chance of interaction with a character who was, well, for most of the characters in Resident Evil 2 for the old one, they were throwaway characters. You met them, you exchanged dialogue, and they usually were dead the next time you ever saw them. Whereas Marvin you interacted with more than once, and he's given a bit more time to shine, a bit more chance to connect, even though fans of the old will realize what's going to happen to him either way. He had more time in the Outbreak series of Resident Evil, and I think that's where they kind of took inspiration and put it in here, because it was cool to see, again, some of these side characters that were just kind of there and then thrown away. And not like thrown away in a bad way. I mean, that's just what happens in Resident Evil. If you're not a main character, your life expectancy isn't too long. Robert Kendo got reworked to where, again, he was a character that you met for 5 seconds and was immediately killed, and that was right in the beginning of the game of the old one, whereas in this one you don't meet him until later on, and he's given more of a family struggle. He's had a family that he's had put through hell. He's still alive, and he's just left to kind of deal with this, and he's there to help shine a little bit of light you don't get to see in the Resident Evil games. Like you see the other people suffering through that haven't been wiped out and slaughtered. And then an example of one that wasn't done so well was Ben, who was a reporter. You don't interact with him a whole bunch. I think actually he had less time in this compared to the original, and I don't think he got too much to shine. Chief Irons, you get the sense of how much of an asshole he is, given the backstory of the character that you're given in this game. It's still very similar to his RE2 the old school counterpart. But they don't really go into emphasis of how deranged he's gotten in this. You get a little bit of a glimpse of it, but it's not explicitly explained, whereas in the old one, he definitely went more crazy on top of being a paid-off douchebag, that he started hunting down more and more survivors, where in this one, I think it's only implied that he hunted 1 or 2 people, whereas in the other one, he definitely hunted down more than one. Some of those included his fellow officers, which helped throw the police station into chaos. Getting to some of the story changes, it is first off made much more gritty and realistic in a sense. It's more grounded. The Resident Evil games have always been kind of this cheesy zombie franchise. You know, Chris Redfield punching a bowl or a Jill sandwich. They've had this certain cheese to them. And it wasn't until, I think, RE7 where they started to take themselves a bit more seriously, but still had ridiculousness. By the way, I haven't played Resident Evil 7. I wasn't a fan of the direction change. That's just personal. Not hating on the game at all. But with RE2, they've taken themselves into a more like serious tone, more gritty tone, and it gets introduced very quickly with how you see some of the characters interact and get attacked and so forth. That also translates to some interactions and the dialogue of the story. With Claire's interactions feel a lot more genuine. They feel more like how a real person would react to the situation they're in. Leon seems very Boy Scoutish, which was a character trait of him in his early days, and also his like midlife was he was a very Boy Scout like character, played by the rules, by the book, etc. All that. This, it feels like he's played far more to that. I think that's them kind of a throwback to more of the cheese, because there's still some of that in there. There's one-liners and all that. But I feel like Leon's was far, far too Boy Scout-like, whereas when playing through both of them, Claire's just feels far superior with her interactions in the beginning of the story and with other characters. The story got more streamlined in this, and with that, I have to throw in the acknowledgement of the old one, where in the old one you had an A and B scenario, and those both played out differently from each other, whereas in this one, the A and B is mostly the indications of what happens in the beginning of the story. For instance, a B scenario isn't going to talk to Marvin at all. Only the A scenario is going to talk to Marvin. In the old games, the A scenario dictated who and what interacted with what. Technically, if you took items in the A scenario, that impacted the B scenario in the old one. That doesn't affect this one. In fact, it's a little weird. For gameplay purposes, a lot of the stuff you do in the B scenario is redoing stuff you did in the A scenario, such as unlocking the parking lot path, going to the sewer tunnel, doing a bunch of stuff that you did in the A scenario that should have been unlocked, technically at that point, but it wasn't. And for gameplay reasons, they made you do it all again. But other things, for instance, if you play the A scenario in the old Resident Evil 2, that character fought the alligator. In this one, the alligator is specifically tied to Leon's campaign. Only Leon is going to fight the alligator. Claire does not fight the alligator at all. And certain interactions only happen with certain characters. And that's how they've kind of streamlined it in that sense. And again, also taking items and such does not affect the A and B scenario. Which personally I'm alright with, but for some people, depending on the level of nostalgia they want to feel, that could be a turnoff in some ways. I personally think it was a nice direction, with the exception of I wish they made the B scenario more different, particularly with how the B scenario is definitely paced to be much faster than the A scenario. It's definitely meant to be where you should know what you're doing, even though they do a nice job of switching up puzzles and everything else, so that you actually have to learn how to do them again, or look them up online. Next, we're going to get into the enemies. Some enemies are redesigned and look cool. For instance, the Lickers look far more terrifying in this iteration. The Plant 43, also known as Ivy, has been redesigned, and that one's gonna be hit or miss with you. The new design's cool and interesting, but I think I prefer the old design where it's much more plant-like, whereas in this one it's more like I use the term in a file, vegified zombies. But that one's up to interpretation. Some enemies are kind of been replaced. The story, tying back into the previous point, has put more focus on the G virus, whereas in the original storyline of RE2, the G virus existed, but was only the threat of William Burke and a few of his creations. They kind of amped that one up in this. I won't get into where it amps up for some spoilers there. But they amped it up in parts, and it's replaced certain enemies. For instance, spiders. There were giant spiders in Resident Evil 2. They aren't in this one, which, thinking back, I don't think is a negative, because I don't think I want to fight giant spiders on this new engine, because it's just going to be far more terrifying. There was also a moth boss. It was a minor boss. That is not in this game. That was removed. I think they could have made it work, possibly, but I know that they've already struggled to get the alligator boss into the game, so I guess the moth boss just had to take the hit for the alligator, and I guess I am fine with that. When fighting the enemies, again, you're not meant to murder all of them you see, and whether you're trying to do that or whether you're trying to flee past them correctly by stunning them first or just by trying to get outside their reach, with how the map is designed, they nail the fact of fighting these claustrophobic environments, or in these hallways, they give you a perception that you think you have enough room. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you really have to stun them and try to get past them real quick, and other times you might just have enough and taking that call is gonna either cost you some health and an item, or you try to plan ahead and just take a hit to some of your ammo. Now, after the story, you will unlock some extra modes. Again, I've already mentioned the A scenario and B scenarios that are in the game, but there's also the Force Survivor and the Tofu modes infamously returning. I have not, again, there's actually more Tofus added in this game, and I have not played through the first Tofu to unlock those other ones yet. Those are more of time trials and, again, challenges to give yourself to try and clear as fast as you can. Particularly, I really like the Force Survivor because of the contrast. Is you're playing as Hunk, who is kind of the Boba Fett of the Resident Evil universe, and you have all these weapons and all that, but you still have this sense of powerlessness in his small little campaign, just given the sheer volume of enemies you're against that you don't have enough ammo to take on. So it's, again, you either try to kill something or stun it to get past it. And again, try and do it in the fastest time possible. You also have a bunch of unlockables. You have a bunch of models to view in the game of enemies and characters that are unlocked from in-game challenges. Such things as simply completing the campaign, kills for certain weapons, to much more challenging ones such as getting certain ranks on completions, never opening the item box, never healing, and some of those are not only just tied to models. They'll unlock unlimited ammo weapons, like pistol, the MP5, and there's a rocket launcher, which all encourages more playthroughs and trying to challenge yourself to try to get faster times, or just trying to unlock everything. Some issues that I have that don't quite fit into the characters, or now that I'm looking at the list of my outlines, they might have actually fit, is you have the option to... if you pre-order the edition of game, you have some extra weapons in the game. They all take 9mm ammo. It's several different versions of the Samurai Edge from the original game. Those are rendered useless very early on, the moment you start finding upgrades for your weapons, such as the Matilda, and later on there's a handgun for Claire. I keep throwing us in there like a terrible person at speaking. But she has a revolver that takes 9mm and eventually finds a handgun. And that handgun immediately outclasses those Samurai Edge weapons. Those are the only times I would use the Samurai Edges, is in the beginning of Claire's playthrough until I got the handgun, or in this case also the unlimited handgun that I abuse maliciously and take out all my frustration on those zombies. Those are Of course, those are entirely optional, so you might not run into that issue. But it was kind of disappointing that how quickly they became useless in the campaign, unless you wanted to use them for pure aesthetics. But that, of course, puts yourself at a slight disadvantage compared to weapons that held higher capacity and took the same ammo. I had instances of stunlock deaths. In particular, with the enemy Mr. X, he would, for instance, knock me on the ground. I wouldn't fly far enough away. I'd get back up, he'd be on me and hit me down again. And depending on health I had at the time, that would either put me all the way in danger or to kill me, or he would knock me into zombies. Same with lickers. If there's ever an instance of more than one I've had where one hit me, I recover from the stumble, the other one would run up and hit me also. And I either had a literal fraction of a second to try and open up my menu, or I just didn't have time to open up the menu at all to try and use a recovery item to prevent death. And those were slightly frustrating to deal with, and may have resulted in one or more time of where I maybe put the game down for a minute or two. Another one that's more of a personal note is there was no cutscene introductions for enemies in the game. In Resident Evil 2, you had a cutscene introduction for the Licker and Mr. X, whereas in this one there is not. There is no context given to them. They just kind of show up. And they have an in-game kind of cutscene which doesn't break the pace of the game, admittingly. So that's why I said this is more of a personal take. This is more of that nostalgia wanting in the game. I kind of wanted a cutscene for them. Mr. X I felt like should have had one more because it's more context that there's more than one Mr. X, as opposed to what was given in the game where it's implied that there's one or two running around possibly. Which on top of also leads into another, which is my only gripe with one of the story things, is certain things that happen. The one I will say that's definitely not spoiler is there was a helicopter crash that happens in Resident Evil 2 in both iterations of the game. And in this iteration of the game, the helicopter crash just happens with no context whatsoever. Whereas in the original, it happened because the helicopter was coming there for any more officers to try and rescue. And one of the officers that got to the rooftop got taken out by zombies, shot in the air, shot the pilot, and that caused a helicopter crash. Whereas in this one, again, the helicopter crash just happens. No cutscene, no nothing, just happens with no context. Which I would have liked some context. I don't know. I'm not sure. It's not super important, but it's just kind of out in left field there. Now, some things I would like to see added to the game, possibly in future updates for this, is I would like a file viewer added for all the files that you find in game. There's currently not one. Also, a cutscene viewer would be nice too. And an unlimited ammo mode. Again, there are unlimited ammo weapons you unlock, but it's only for those weapons. And I think it'd be nice if, again, it had conditions like you had to clear all the campaigns first or something, and you unlock this, so it allows you to use more weapons to kind of get that power fantasy feel. Again, this is meant to be survival horror, which of course you get enough of that, but then you start getting limited ammo weapons, and it kind of breaks that survival horror element to the game anyway. And it'd be nice to be able to go through, just like for instance Leon, just going around using the shotgun on literally everything I wanted, without being on PC and having cheats. Now, to finally get to the final score of the game. For those unfamiliar with my scale, I go through on a system of 1 through 10. 10 being very, very good, perfect, 1 being low score, and 5 being kind of the okay middle of the road. I use half points. I don't do 0.8s and some other bullshit like that. 0.5s usually is an indication of it had some things that held it back from the next score, but I think it's higher. It's a little bit higher than what it should be for that. For Resident Evil 2, I give a 9.5 out of 10. It is a very, very good game for people that are interested in survival horror, that are fans of the series. Even newcomers that can handle a difficult game will enjoy this. And the only thing that kind of holds it back are just, again, those minor gripes, which some of those are straight personal. The game also has free DLC coming, which I'm not sure if I mentioned or not. I might have missed that. It's in my notes there. That's going to have free DLC that comes out in the middle of February that are what-if stories of some of the survivors, like the gun shop owner that we mentioned earlier, Robert Kendo. I think it's very well done. I would like to... if they add some of the things from my wish list, that'd be really nice to have. I'm looking forward to see what Capcom does, because it's already been leaked that they're apparently working on Resident Evil 3, which this game definitely has elements that kind of tie into that, and Resident Evil 3 did have you go to the police station at a point in the story, and then clearly it looks like some things might have happened that are in context for that. That will be interesting to see, and see what they do with Resident Evil 3 storyline, because it was convoluted back in the day between Resident Evil 2 and 3 happening at the same time, practically. I would also like to see, if you're listening, Capcom, if anyone's listening here that can talk to Capcom, remaster and bring back the Outbreak series. I think that'd be very interesting to have back in the foray of a survival horror co-op, is that series, which I think did it fairly well and is really underrated for its time. As always, like, comment, subscribe, all that fun YouTube-y stuff, because half the time YouTube doesn't work, and, well, I'm not a person with thousands of subs or millions of subs, so, I'd like to keep doing this more and more often, so I can commit to more time to these. So as always, we're going to come back over to Gaming House for gameplay and commentary, which, well, I'm working on finishing my uploads of Leon's playthrough. It's difficult, alright? It takes a lot of time, and I got to work. I got to funds this.